part of the genocide of First Nations people at Portland. So I think it's important, whilst we are acknowledging where we are, that we acknowledge, perhaps some of us can, some of us do not need to, but I certainly have to acknowledge the genocide of the First Nations people of Western Victoria. Well, we're here tonight. I hope that everyone has got this, so you know the website of grounded.org.au, which is about community land trust, and it's also as much about Carl and his journey with some other scholars, but particularly his zeal and dedication over some 20 years of delving deep into how we might have a greater acceptance of community land trusts in Australia. There are many people, when I say many, I certainly am familiar with more than 1,000 people across Australia who have had a go, who've done deep research, but Carl decided to leave Prosper 3-4 years ago and form Grounded, and it's brought some more depth to the work that others in New South Wales and across West Australia and South Australia, in fact all of the states, in some way have tried to have a go at bringing shared equity via a community land trust. I just want to mention 3 words to try and set you at peace whilst you listen and watch Carl's presentation, but I urge you to listen to Carl perhaps more than trying to read the screen. You can load down the Grounded, I call it the manual. It's a good, short, deep, dense document. And I think if you listen to Carl's story tonight, more than look at the pictures, just you can close your eyes even and listen. But I'd like you to think about 3 words, the third of which I'm going to replace with a new word. But think about the word trust, think about the word cooperation, and think about the word innovation. And because of Victorian Government announcements as of the 10th of April this year, you can replace the word innovation with incorporation. Because whilst many of us might think that a community land trust is an innovation in legal and living terms, the Victorian Government, for reasons that I scratch my head about, because I've been in this advocacy space since the early 1970s and I'm 4th generation on the father's side of the family. Welcome.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, they're heading over.
I'm 4th generation in advocacy around the environment and health and housing. And at 75 years of age, I can say I've been in the desert of that advocacy because it seemed to all go out of fashion, the idea of trusting one another at a community level, of cooperating at a community level, of incorporating housing societies and medical and health societies and environmental benefit societies. It all seemed to go out the door and around the corner to the trash heap when we had the Australian Post-World War Construction Commission and a belief in the American way of living and settling. We certainly removed the notion of learning from our First Nations peoples, and we said that it wasn't a good idea that people cooperated. It was a good idea that housing societies or building societies, as they're often called, should be demutualised, should be corporatised, should become a bank rather than a building society or a mutual society of one kind or another. So I want you to think about how you would cooperate with others whom you trust a little but don't know well enough to trust a lot yet, and whether you've got the courage and the patience to journey with people, as we've witnessed recently in Castlemaine, with some, I think, 400 people, families, households, groups have purchased the building with by lending money to the Castlemaine Cooperative. So we don't need to think about, are we being innovative? We just need to be followers of those that did it before and those that did it recently. And there are enough people around in this community that are over 90 years of age that can tell many stories of how trusts and cooperatives and the like, friendly societies, it wasn't an innovation, it was an incorporation that you were expected to learn as a child. I got my first lecture that I can recall as a 4-year-old on a Sunday at lunch with 3 generations, I being the 4th generation at the table. There was more beer than I was allowed to drink at the table. And so I welcome you here as people that have A, the generosity, and B, the courage to listen to Carl. To bother some members of the Castlemaine Co-op that are in the room, to tap on someone's shoulder and ask whether grandma or grandpa did it. So Carl, I welcome, the word innovation I threw out and said the word incorporation, because on the 10th of April this year, the Victorian government said that it was okay, it's okay, I said it quietly, it's okay to think about shared equity. It's okay to think about environmental net gain when designing a house and a place to settle. There's a long list. They call them pillars. Not pillars, not pillows. Right? They're supposed to hold things up, we hope. But one doesn't have to leave here tonight feeling as though you are mischievous, that you're up to skullduggery, that you're part of a revolution. You're very damn ordinary as of the 10th of April 2025. I thought it was all about innovation tonight when I was back on the 31st of March thinking about this gathering. But no, we're all normal, okay? We're all normal. It's okay. Police are not going to come in. Not yet. Never on this topic. So, here we are, Carl. Over to you.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
Excellent. And a big shout out to everyone online. We've had a few technical difficulties and I'll be looking at the comments, hoping the audio quality is better. But yeah, welcome everyone. Great to see you here. Great, Kaz, you're here. You made it. And Warwick, you know, people who said they weren't mightn't be able to make it are here. So I'm really happy to have you all here as, we try and muster the courage to take on propertied interests. And there we go. Here we are with MACL, of which John and I are the 2 most active members. We are looking for fellow board members, so if anyone is so inspired and would like to help us try and mimic the sort of mobilisation that the Castlemaine Co-op just achieved, that's what we really need. And we've been really encouraged by the response of council in this community and the forward behaviour they've shown, the leadership they've shown. So yeah, we really hope that Grounded can work with MACL and we can really start to challenge this dominant profit-making model that we're told is the only alternative. Good old Margaret Thatcher, there is no alternative. Well, as John just reminded us, we do have a long history of coming together as a community and we can do amazing things when that happens. But today, for some added motivation, we are going to talk about this amazing report that I've spent a good part of a decade ruminating on. And yeah, really excited that we based it on Castlemaine. All the data is based on Castlemaine, so I'm pleased to be here to actually talk about some of those data points. As my clicker kind of works. There we go, finally. We're having a few tech issues tonight, but of course this came up on my feed yesterday and I said, bugger it. Flip in 60 seconds. This is what is wrong with property. So I signed up for the call today and spent 7 minutes with one of Graham's patsies, but yeah, this is what is really tearing society apart. People thinking that they can come into a community, buy a property from a mobile phone, sitting in a hammock, perhaps on a beach in their favourite tax haven. You know, you can buy and sell from anywhere on the planet these days, and this commodification of a place to call home is, you know, it's demonstrated so clearly when you think people can flip a property within 30 to 90 days. And there I was thinking that interest-only loans were the big thing government should be banning. But I soon learned of this concept of money partners. And these loans from one property investor to a new young buck coming through the property flipping world, and they can pay a 10 to 20% return in only 30 to 90 days. So there is so much money being made in real estate, and there's got to be a fairer way to share those spoils. And that's what I've spent my career talking about. And so, yeah, we can do the big picture tax reform stuff, or we can get on the ground and show by doing through the community land trust model. So that's what we're here to get into. If I can click away. What? Press the there you go. So this is what we need, this cultural shift from me to we. You know, how can we think as a community and have a system that doesn't force us out of a community we love? And that's what so often happens under this concept of gentrification. When property flippers come in, they buy and sell, pushing the prices up. That means the rents have to go up to justify that price, and people's wages haven't been able to keep up. So the price of property has been increasing by 3 times our wage growth. Yeah, go on, Maggie. Thank you. And so this change of culture, you know, we were brought up to believe in all of these things. Giving more than taking, of looking after others and a fair go for all. But when it comes to the most essential element of, well, right up there as one of the most essential elements, it's just take. So let's try and rebalance that. So this is the basics to a community land trust, is that the trust owns the land and the resident only has to own the home. So that means when the typical mortgage is 40% for the home, 60% for the land, there are some big savings involved. So in order to do this, the best method is to have the land held in trust by a not-for-profit board under a company limited by guarantee, and we have a tripartite governance model of 1/3 residents, 1/3 neighbours and community members, and 1/3 civic-minded people. And it has a few advantages setting it up that way. One is that there are some people who don't live on site, so they get that benefit of perspective of being able to see things from the medium and long term. And there's also a very important governance issue in that the residents can't stack the board and remove the affordable housing provisions. And community land trusts have been around for about 50 odd years, but before that there were what's known as land colonies that were set up around the turn of the 20th century. And now, 3 generations on, there have been instances in some of those communities where the affordable provisions have been watered down or land sold off and not held in trust. So, yeah, it's quite something that that this mic has come back into play. Okay.
It's recording it on my camera, that's what we're going to do.
Okay, thanks, Nat. So,
You were never known to have a small voice or a loud voice, Carl. It's okay.
good.
Just as a heads up, when we do questions, people online have asked, people are going to have to get up front
Okay.
and ask through the laptop.
Very good.
Sorry, everybody, but
Maggie, if we can move on to the next one. So these are the best practices in shared equity, and you will notice this perpetual term that comes up. You know, we want to hold the land forever and make sure it stays affordable. We have government policies around that are costing millions and millions of dollars. $6.3 billion the federals have announced with the Help to Buy program over 4 years, and it's only going to last for between 8 to 10 years. When someone sells, they have to start again, and it's like crazy, and have to buy at another higher price. You know, it'll be $12 billion then. Why can't we channel some of this money into perpetually affordable programs that have this targeted eligibility criteria? So generally people who have a connection to this community over 3 to 5 plus years, they can be key workers, essential workers, whatever the community decides is a real priority. You can write that into your constitution and have that as part of your selection criteria. So another important aspect to make sure that communities thrive. You know, we can't always reward those with top dollar. We can't always reward those first in, first served sorts. We need to look after the real roots of our communities. The low entry cost is the biggest that's probably the biggest advantage to a community land trust. The deposits required in the market these days are close to, you know, $175,000, $200,000 in the city, and around about $130,000 out here. So they're huge numbers to try and save up, and we reckon there's a fairer way to do it. So the other big aspect is that a land trust is scalable. So that is really important, that not only can we ensure that the land stays affordable, but by closing the loop on the land bounty, we can actually look after more people over time. So in this report, we found that we can reduce deposit sizes by 60%. So instead of that $130,000, it's somewhere $40,000 to $50,000. So that's the sort of thing that someone in their 20s can say, wow, I could work towards that. You know, someone starting over in their 50s might have access to superannuation, might have some cash saved up, so they can find that very important and precious cornerstone of dignity of having security of tenure. So over time, we judge it on a 12-year residency. A resident would save about $153,000. So that is significant. And when we compared it to a renter and someone who buys in the open market, the CLT resident obviously has that $153,000 saving, but look at the poor old renter. These were on pretty conservative numbers as well, that if we look to the next slide, we show this in a different way over 30 years, and you can see the renter sandwiched there in the middle in the rust. They've got the jagged cost structure there because every 3 years I estimated they had to move. Many renters tell me it's every 1 to 2 years, so we tried to be as conservative as we could in this report, and I only indexed rents by 3%. not the 6 to 9, 10% people have been experiencing out there in the market. So you will note that the land trust in green there, it does increase slowly, and that's as the municipal rates increase and the ground lease that's paid to the land trust, which is really important. Instead of borrowing the land from the bank and paying some $31,000 a year, like the person in the pink in the market home does, the resident under the land trust is only paying $13,000 for the mortgage, but they're paying about $4,500 in the ground lease. So there's about a $14,000 saving each year. And, you know, they're the sort of bickies that we need to have some breathing space these days. There's an up arrow there. I think you went past one. If you go to the right, Maggie, there's an up arrow.
Okay.
That one. So over those 12 years, I mean, this is like this is the key point really, if we're to maintain perpetual affordability, that the resident only gets a third of the gains, but they do get that security of tenure. They do get a community who's prioritising good living on environmental principles. Each community can structure their actual aims towards what they want to achieve, but around the world they seem to be the sort of principles that people work towards. And by sharing the gains like this, we can expand the base for affordable housing. And that is the key thing that this model does that all of the government policies don't do. So we're showing them how to save money at least cost. And that's why I get meetings with Department of Treasury, planning, finance, to discuss, you know, how government can do things better, because they're wasting a heck ton of money out there. It's like money is growing on trees when it comes to housing. Everyone's heard of the First Home Buyers Grant? We all spent, Warwick and I and many others spent, you know, decades demonising this grant. And so they came up with a new one called the stamp duty discount. And first home buyers are allowed to purchase a home without paying stamp duty. And it sounds great. The average Herald Sun reader goes, oh, that's good. But what it's really meant is that instead of paying that $35,000 to the government, they're going, wow, I've got an extra 35 grand. I'm going to increase my bid. So it's actually a seller's subsidy. So there's 880 million we're wasting here in Victoria. They're saying it's going to be 4 years until we hit $1 billion, but on the way it's growing, we'll be hitting $1 billion wasted this time next year. New South Wales is already wasting $1 billion on it. And God, the people up there have, you know, they must be pulling their hair out. And when they realise that this stamp duty discount's happening, then we got 6.3 billion on Help to Buy. There's so much money out there that could be better used. So that's what we're really passionate about. So how can we make this happen? We are really interested in at Grounded of helping a group of friends come together who may be in the fortunate situation that they could chip in 50, 100 grand, something like that. Maybe they know someone, maybe they got a family member who wants to donate land, but we can come together under the sort of principles John talked about of cooperation, under a trust structure to buy the land and set it up so that the benefits of housing is shared amongst that community. And by sharing the access to land costs, we can not only enable us and our friends, but also our wider community to benefit from that. So it might be, 3 or 4 friends, but why not a couple of banks of mum and dads coming on board as well, and we get that community stockpile of money together and buy the land at the right time so that we can have equity with ethics. So, Grounded, we are the first NGO to be set up to dedicate towards this housing model. And it's been talked about for a long, long time, and we haven't got one off the ground. There's a few groups getting really close to getting it underway around the country, but we're about to announce, we're announcing tonight that we're doing a CLT incubator. So, we've got a very wise board that can help formulate that housing vision. I can do the economics. I've got the model behind this report ready to go so that we can plug in the land cost, the cost per square metre of the build, all of these things to help build the business case for when a community group goes to see council to talk about getting approval for such a project. So that's what we really need, and we're busy lobbying the government to try and get them to fund a proper incubator, one with the sort of deep pockets we see with this 6.3 billion thrown around. It'd be amazing what we could do with $10 million just to try and be that focal point for groups who are trying to find a way to do it differently. And when we get, so many people read housing stories each and every day, and it's as if governments, they are so trusting of the development lobby. And they're jumping over hoops to do what's required. But imagine any other business that produced a product that failed even middle-class Australians. People earning $200,000 can just get in the door. Did you ever think you'd hear that?
Yes, no.
And to think that it's all happened within, 5 years post-COVID. We thought it was crazy enough pre-COVID. Now it's had another kick up. I'm really worried that it's not going to be long until we have 40 and 50-year mortgages. And that's something I'm really determined to stop. We can't be like Japan and have those multi-generational mortgages. We might as well walk around with a noose around our neck. It's just crazy, this trajectory we're on. So this is the financial flow infographic. So we can see here that Castlemaine, imagine if we could buy land for 1.7 mil. So we've got up to $2 million in the model to afford that. Hiring all the architects and council infrastructure costs and so forth, $2.5 million. The construction cost, we are looking at modular housing as a way forward. There's incredible things happening around the world. John's very passionate about a group out of Austria who the Victorian government brought out, who are producing 300,000 homes a year, flat packed. Like the amount
where each home comes off the production line, complete with windows, electricals, plumbing.
Talk up.
Imagine a 200 square metre kit. It could be 4 50s or 2 or whatever, but 200 square metres of dwelling, whether it's an apartment, a townhouse or whatever, that is at 8 energy rating to 10, and it comes off the production line flat packed like an IKEA kitchen in 58 minutes. And the quality is beyond anything that's currently on the market in Australia, unless it's been private built, purpose built with architect. So it's we're at a very interesting time around manufacturing as well.
So to really prove, to really get the business case for a CLT to stack up, what we did was we sold 7 homes to pay down debts really quickly. So that a third of the homes were sold at these prices, which are still less You know, a 2-bedroom home in Castlemaine, the median price I think is around about 650, 670. So is still a saving for those who are buying these market price homes. But in the absence of any of that government subsidy, we need to do something to pay down debts quickly, because we want to get, you know, those 6, 7, 8% interest rates off our books as quick as possible, so that we can show that we're debt free in 5 years. And importantly, with the sort of closed loop philosophy behind a land trust, with just 14 homes, we can have $1 million in savings in year 10. So this is what it looks like over 30 years. As you know, we get through the first decade, which is, you know, the hardest year for any community, then the savings really start to build up. And so in the report, I talked about one CLT funding another CLT each decade. So it's that powerful that we could really start providing independent supply. And for those who've read the report, we do talk about it being a ownership type model to begin with, but as we get into the second decade and the links with philanthropy, with community, with government improve, hopefully we'll be able to increase that affordable rental supply that's just so crucial at the moment, that's just, you know, vanishing before our eyes. So this is a new approach for Australia, and I've talked about the waste in stamp duty discounts and help to buy, but I looked at the return on investment of what would happen if we did this, and it was staggering. It was a 450% return over 30 years. Like, it was actually jaw-dropping to see that sort of supply outcome at least cost possible. And, you know, often when we hear about affordable housing, neighbours are concerned that it's going to lead to, you know, unscrupulous individuals living nearby. But I really want us to twist that on the head and say, look, what about the benefit to the local community? You know, people saving money means they don't have to steal. They can start building themselves back up again, building their dignity, their pride, and their connection with their community. And wow, those savings across 20 homes are $308,000 each and every year. So over in Dalesford, near where I live, some of you will be aware that the entrance to town is being dramatically changed, and the community were very concerned that we're going from this lovely hamlet village-like atmosphere to all of a sudden be greeted by these cookie-cutter homes that are coming through. And you know, the Block TV show was used as a sort of Trojan to come in, and they're rolling out these homes and promised that by having this rezoning they would push down prices because there would be more supply. So of course they advertised on their website it was $780,000 to buy in, and I checked it another 4-6 weeks later, it was $787,000, and I was like, oh, those buggers. And then I went and checked the real estate website, and no, there's nothing for under $950,000. And this is a problem with government. They give the rezoning, tick it off, and then look the other way. And we can't afford this anymore. We've got a National Housing Supply and Affordability Council who still don't look at this. So it drives me mad that developers promise one thing, but then, because they have fiduciary duties that we all know about, they're not allowed to push prices down, because their bank will call them up and say, look, you've pushed down the value on the rest of the development. Can you make up the $14 million you've just discounted? We can't lend against that higher land value anymore. So it's all, you know, the for-profit model really needs some balancing out. and just the whole industry from property flipping through to land banking, through to corruption, getting public infrastructure, train lines built near someone's land holdings. There's so much corruption that goes on in this industry. So I really reckon it's time that for-purpose housing gets a chance. Why do all these subsidies go towards those making big bucks when it's great to see the Victorian government doing the big home build, but it's nowhere near enough. Okay, we're almost there. So this is what Grounded is all about. Having this grounded in recognition of our First Nations people, grounded in place. What is appropriate for this community? What does the community really want? Let's be deliberative in our development model and engage with the people who want to live there. Grounded in ecology, we have to have best practices for environmental principles, and what we see around the world is that land trusts are building higher quality buildings that can withstand hurricanes in the South of America, can withstand flooding because they're not spending so much on land. And with that, they can invest more in the architecture. Grounded in justice. We need justice for future generations. We've got to give our youngsters some hope. We have equity, as you've seen throughout the report, and grounded in responsibility. We need a good governance structures incorporated. We need the best practices. So there's 2 signatures on the bank accounts. We have monthly accounting that's transparent, that members can see online. There's so much that can be done that we can incorporate into this. And of course, being grounded in community is just so important. Because, we all know people who've got elements of a home that we don't need. We connect with community. There's so much there we can share. So one of the problems with land trusts is, and with all intentional communities, people buy in and then it's really hard to leave because you have, again, that deposit barrier traps you there. So the way we've worked it out is that on a land trust, we try really hard to have someone who's an accountant or a financial advisor, someone financially literate, and all mortgage payments are securitized through the trust. So that means the trust gets first warning on any household that might be struggling to make their mortgage payments. And then we set up a plan to help them and help them through any difficulty. But from that, we're hoping and really going to try hard that residents can save a quarter of what they would be spending if they'd bought in the market, and put that into an ethical share fund. And then over the 12 years, that earns a nice little returner. It's only $4,000 odd a year. And then when combined with a modest capital gain, there's around about $100,000 as a deposit, which is not perfect, but it's a step in the right direction. And, I think it would be very interesting to see what sort of low interest loans could be provided via community banks and so forth to help residents if they did want to move into the open market. So this is what we need to do. We need to stop this reliance on outsider interests, on big capital. We can do so much ourselves. We have the expertise. And so we need our local builders. We need insights on land that someone's willing to sell on the cheap to help the community. We need local builders. There's been so much consolidation in the development industry. How do we support those local builders who can come through? Whilst we've talked of modular, there's still going to be the community hall, still going to be, you know, lots of infrastructure we need built on site. So, yeah, there should be, you know, plenty to go round. So there we go. Let's hope we can bring this future of housing into Castlemaine, into most communities, because, goodness me, so many have been torn apart by this rapacious pricing trajectory we've been on since the place to call home has become commodified. So thank you very much.
Just before I invite questions, I just want to reinforce a couple of points that Carl's made. Broadly speaking, shared equity now has a tick from federal and Victorian government, and as of around the 10th of April in the case of the Victorian government, and in the latter part of May following the Labor government getting back in Canberra. The second point is that banks are following on from that. So the Commonwealth Bank announced in March that they will be providing a shared equity loan, which is just sort of bringing back loans that they used to have majorities of for tenants in common or cooperative housing societies. So those new old loans will come onto the market, it would seem, from current information around October. And it's not just the Commonwealth Bank, Bank Australia, Bendigo Bank, NAB, Westpac, they're all talking about shared equity loans. So that again, what used to be normal then became unusual and not available is now to be available again. The third point, when we talk about modular housing, we're in fact removing that word and replacing it with prefabrication of building elements. It's really important that the skills base that this Shire in particular has of artisan builders, that we draw upon those skills and also designers. And so the type of building system is more like going to, I'll wash my mouth out in a minute, going to Bunnings and walking along the aisles and selecting the elements. But if you were not going to Bunnings, but you were going to a cooperative supply chain that your community land trust had shared equity in, it's very much about linking the available skills, be they soft or hard, in the community to be part of the DIY. So this is about building a home as a village, where a village raises a child, keeps village together through a sustainable economy, and says farewell to elders. And so there's some incredibly deep research that Carl's done, and across the membership of the grounded board. And again, why have we spent so much of our energy in concentrating on Castlemaine? Because this is one hell of a think tank, this geography. You know, we are blessed to have a solid school system here that's always stepped outside the square. We're blessed to have a diversity of people. We're quite capable of being inclusive as a community. And we've got a really deep skills base that goes back to the gold rush. There's deep engineering and deep fabrication in this space. We shouldn't be afraid of what's becoming available, but most importantly, shared equity is normal. So I invite questions. And I can't see through the light with my multifocals giving me lovely rainbows as I get caught.
Go ahead.
No, it's because I put the lights in that cup.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, we're okay. Is anyone got a question? Keppel.
Do you need to point something at me, or you're okay?
If you can come up and
I
speak,
can come up.
that would be good.
Make sure I don't forget my question process.
Grab a hand.
Yeah, no, I'm good.
Put some more lights on it.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
ooh, so
Yeah. Thank you.
right up here. So what I'm wondering about is if you could say something about how community land trusts in other countries have what sort of an influence they've had on social fabric, affordability in communities where they've been introduced.
Yep. Yes, well, there's plenty of examples. I write in the report about Bernie Sanders as Mayor of Vermont, providing $200,000 in 1983 for Champlain Land Trust in Burlington, Vermont, and they now own over 3,000 homes. So they've got all sorts of, contiguous land trusts and lots that are just dotted around the community. So you can have either version as long as that land is being managed under a trust. Another one is Lopez Island CLT, and my goodness, I'd love to go and visit these guys off Washington State. And they've got, it's more of a farm-based land trust, but they've had, must be 6 or 7 businesses start up under the guise of not having to pay extortionate rents to get a business up and running. And so that sort of principle operates through both residential and commercial trusts, land trusts around the world. There's another one in...
Carl, there was announced just 2 days ago the largest ever housing project in the UK is a community land trust.
Wow.
Largest ever
Incredible.
housing project, whether from the king or from the corporate.
Wow.
They came second and third.
Gee, well, we'll have to read up on that one. That's a great one.
Yeah. But in terms of the broader social impact on the community, has any research been done on? So obviously, it's benefiting the people who are living in the land trust.
Yep.
But that would be presumably flow-on benefits in reducing general housing stress and crime.
Yeah,
No, it's a good question. No, I've got an answer. Thank you. Got to keep this guy in control. The main study I'm aware of is one that looks at the public investment versus the returns across mental health, life expectancy, and income equality, and it was 3.1 for every $1 invested. So they're extraordinary returns, but that was only within the CLT. The wider study you're talking about is something I'm not aware of. John?
The majority of housing since 1968 in Denmark has been cooperative housing, and there's deep longitudinal research as to community cohesion, stability, standard of health.
Amazing.
And the whole process of forming a community housing association is a 6 weeks due diligence, very similar to the Incorporated Community Association law here in Australia, but it attaches in a really solid grid with the banking system and the statutory approval process. And you can choose to take 10 years to form your association, or you can take 9 months.
Amazing.
But that's one of the things we're trying to do at Grounded is help groups. There's one group I know of that took 14 years to come together and get a project up and running, and surely there's a way we can provide the resources, provide the expertise so that groups can come together and more quickly come up with the sort of needed evidence and tools so that government and finance, of course, can come on board. Next question.
Is there space in setting up the governance for people to sell their home, get first priority to it, and therefore fund the project? Not that I've talked to my husband about it.
Okay.
That sounds like some way,
The short
being one of
answer
those
is yes.
7.
The short answer is yes.
Yeah.
It takes slow time, careful, that's all.
Yeah.
The question was, dear internet, was could someone sell their house and use the proceeds to fund a CLT? And certainly you would be a founder, and we're not far off. If that was you, and we're preparing a document for founders who perhaps have inherited land and want to do good for their community. Here's how you could either donate it or you could get repaid under this framework. So it's not hard to make it clear for people to be able to help build momentum towards the land trust, and it's just it's been amazing seeing what the Castlemaine Co-op has done with all this private funding, not needing the banking system. And that has been one of the problems we've had with land trusts, is that it has been hard to get funding. But we have the example of the Canberra land rent scheme, which I believe is one of the nation's most innovative housing affordability policies. And that's been running since about 2007. So there's a number of banks who lend to residents in that under that program. So with projects like that, and then the Victorian ground lease model that's come along, where Premier Andrews at the time talked about basically arranging a deal with community housing providers that they could build housing on government land under a leasehold arrangement. So that was another interesting step forward to this ability to separate the land from the homes. So,
Carl, I think it's important just to emphasise, we're talking about old law here. We're talking about old law that stopped being used for 50 years. So we lack an availability of people in the legal and accounting and advisory spaces that even know about this. But we are talking about old law, and it's very helpful that government is now saying it's okay again.
Well, on the mention of old, I'm thinking the demographic, I mean, excusing half of the people here tonight, but usually the people who are talking about land trusts have their forever home, which it's not important that it's worth twice it was 2 years ago to us, but it could be useful to sell it and then live in a new house, smaller, no garden.
Yes, or to put a secondary mortgage on it and use the equity in the home to help fund. There's a lot of innovative financing tools around, and we are looking for a accounting whiz, if anyone knows such a person who's skilled in structuring finance for alternative housing models. Something we're putting out to the internet there. So there are people around, but we have the lawyers, we have planners, architects, but that financial ninja is someone who knows how to structure things up appropriately, is one of the links that we're going to meet soon.
They usually work for the other side.
Yes. Yeah.
They could have an epiphany.
That's right.
Well, there are some amazing accountants in the community housing industry as well, and there's some wise heads in there who are finally getting some funding through the big housing build, and New South Wales is rolling out the public and social housing. But 6,000 homes here and there over 4 years barely catches up with the market failure that these rapidly increasing prices are causing.
I just want to talk about for a millisecond the other side. I live on the Bellarine Peninsula, and I got a phone call from someone I've never met before 10 days ago who said, John, my family has had a house in St Leonard's for 3 generations. My wife and I moved into it as our retirement home 15 months ago. I retired as not quite a managing partner of a tier 1 accounting firm, and I'm giving 2 years to our village to form a village cooperative along the lines of the Castlemaine cooperative that I just read about. He's working about an 80-hour a week at the moment, and his rate is that he doesn't pay for a coffee wherever he sits down to talk with people in our village.
There'll be someone like that around here too.
Yeah.
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 Lovely. So,
Just one other case study there. There's a woman and her daughter who have just repeatedly over 3 years turned down a $1 million purchase from three different tier 1 developers in order to form a trust-based structure that what ultimately will be, as planning rolls through, will be 2,500 homes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I mean there are people at our cafe who are doing things that we don't even know about.
Which
It's instant land.
We can't afford to drink coffee there.
it does feel though that more community groups are starting to recognise that the market is not delivering what we were promised, and they're coming together. Whether it's through farming, through various retail organisations, to come up with an alternative.
They see it through their kids and grandkids.
Yes, because everyone's thinking of their kids and grandkids because it's so crucial. Okay, question here.
How is the ownership of the house part defined? Is it a sort of a tenants in common arrangement with the trust, or?
No, they have full ownership rights of the home, as long as they agree to keep paying the land lease and some basic, bylaw type principles. But the main thing is they take out a borrowing from the bank themselves and maintain that payment structure just like you would a normal mortgage. So there's nothing different really about it, except that you're paying so much less.
Yeah, and then you negotiate with the land trust if you wanted to sell it also.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. And the interesting evidence from overseas is that by reducing the need to pay so much for land during the global financial crisis, the foreclosure rate within community land trusts was 82% lower. And because of this, Fannie Mae now in America is standardising the banking contracts for land trusts. So they're doing the work for the land trust movement because they recognise there's this public benefit from providing affordable housing. So, there's a number of banks coming through, and Jeff Bezos's ex, she is doing amazing stuff funding CLTs over there. Sorry, I should remember that name. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, just to tease that point out
Yep.
a bit further, so is the basic principle, I mean, in terms of council rate evaluations, you've got your unimproved value and your capital improved value.
Yes.
Essentially, the difference between one and the other is the value of the improvements that
Yes.
the partner owns, and the land value is the underlying value that the trust owns.
That's right. And so valuers have 7 different models to value the land and house. So there's quite a few techniques to do it. And the difference between a valuer and an economist is that the valuer has to be confident enough in their valuation that they can stand up in a court of law, whereas an economist just has to say it on camera virtually. There's no real qualification. So the valuation industry is always pretty conservative. But within the land trust model, I tried to make this talk a bit less technical. We talked about the ground lease, but when you go to sell, there's a 50% share of the capital gains. And so that's how the land trust gets its return on investment and can build up that kitty so we can expand into more housing. Those two functions sort of pull the price down on what people will bid for it, because they know they've got this ongoing land lease, and then they've got this. They're not going to make capital gains out of it, so
That's
yeah.
not why they're buying in. They're buying in
That's-
because they want a home.
Yeah, well, we just are trying to do, the land trust movement ensures that every resident who buys in has independent legal advice. The lawyer has to sign the sale of contract. And so, there's a lot of education that goes in to help people undo the damage that the block and other real estate TV shows have done to our thinking. And so, yeah, it's really important that people get that story, that it's we are prioritising security of tenure and the community connections that are possible by living together, rather than this me, I want to make lots of money, because there's no other alternative. And we're saying now there will be, and I'm looking forward to a future where we have more community-owned retirement villages. The fact that people need $400,000, $500,000 as a bond to get into a retirement home.
And the management fees are delayed, and so experience 3 years after they've died, you get $20 each.
Yes. Yeah.
Interestingly, in terms of valuations, 20 years ago when I was working at Mount Alexandershire as a planner, every 3 years, valuations were done by registered valuers employed by council.
Yes.
State government changed that and it got down to annually. My understanding now is that the valuation of properties is actually set by the state government, not by council.
I don't think so. I know valuers, and they have to. There is an increasing use of what's known as automated valuation mechanisms, AVMs, but there still are valuers pouring through those details, and in regional areas they're still doing site by site, from my understanding. But it's been a real improvement that Australia has. Good, thank you, Lucas. Victoria has annual land valuations. That's so important. New South Wales had them every 3 and 5 years. Canberra, back when they did the leasehold system, did them every 20 years. And so every 19 year, the property lobby would start fuming that their council rates were about to go up. Well, geez, how many $1,000 has the site gone up in value? So they were always trying to take, and not much acceptance that we have to pay something back. So, it will be really interesting to see how AI influences both the profit-seeking motive in real estate, but also working with the young tech whizzes who are concerned about their future, and how can we get prop tech for good so we can have community principles embedded in an AI automated valuation mechanism, so that it can help the land trust do that sort of work transparently, and people can see what sort of principles are underpinning that valuation. But we're really at an interesting time in terms of how the real estate industry has consolidated, how they're using big data to run their algorithms, so that when a property that ticks all their boxes comes on sale, they can put a cash offer on the table within 2 hours. And that's what we're competing with. It's just beginning in Australia, this build to rent model, which Wall Street sort of underpinning. And I encourage you, if anyone's got a pen, to write down an incredible article I came across yesterday. It's called Messing with Texas. And it's by a guy named Matt Stoller. And if you want to sign up to his e-news, he is incredible. he talks about bigger picture stuff, so the danger of monopoly and privatisation, but he goes through and shows how all of these acts of consolidation within real estate have even destroyed the one pin-up community in America that the new advocacy phenomenon of the YIMBY movement always holds up and says, we don't need zoning regulations, we don't need any of this stuff, because look at Texas. Well, the latest information out of Texas, Dallas-Fort Worth, is that prices have doubled post-COVID. And so a lot of that is because Wall Street's using these algorithms to find where people are earning a lot more than what they're paying for somewhere to live, and then they're buying that land and pushing the prices up to what they can bear. And so we're at a point where it's really the community versus financial interests, and we've got to come together whilst we can to start laying the groundwork so that in future times, there's an evidence trail for future generations to follow. Mary Faith.
I was just wondering about what you think about the merit of land trusts where there's group housing, or one big block of land, say with 10 houses on it, versus the different individual homes throughout, but still owned by land trusts.
Yeah, well, I mean, it can happen either way, but I think those community synergies, I'd love to see communities being able to, you could still do the bulk buying, you could still have the barter-based childcare. All of those things can happen in distributed CLTs, but I just think they're probably more likely to happen when you're living in the same community. You've got the community hall, next to it's a community garden. You've got, the A1 chefs who decided to set up their own business, and you've done the mapping of all of the fruit foraging around the community and know where to go to get that fruit and value add to it. So there's so much we can do when we work together. It's ludicrous that self-interest rules over the common interest.
I mean, the second dwelling legislation makes what you're suggesting so possible. And if we...
John, could you talk up?
Okay. The second dwelling legislation allows those people who have a home and have 300 square metres of spare land. That's a very easy way to move into land acquisition, because it becomes land leasing rather than land buying per se. We're not talking about subdivision, so we're at a very interesting time where community can come together. Individual property owners can come together softly into the cooperative housing space rather than sell out and invest in. I think we've got permission from government, but is this right within culture? But we now have permission. I mean, if we were in, part of what Denmark decided in the 1960s was that it needed to provide secure housing to everybody because they wanted the people to think with their head about what sort of economy they could develop coming out of the 1960s and out of post-World War II. And so massive growth in industry because people are secure. The children know where they're going to school. Everyone knows where the health centre is. Yes, the taxes are high in Denmark. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about investing in place-based security. And I think the leadership that's coming through the scholarship of the Castlemaine Institute, the co-op, grounded. I mean, we've got what you've done with Wink. It's here. The wisdom is here. Within 20 kilometres, 10 kilometres, within 1 to 4 hours walk, without getting in a car or getting on the internet, you can meet people and have a conversation that have done it. I think that's really important. Who has done it, so that I don't feel frightened because it is different. It's not going down to the real estate agent. It's going and talking to Faith. You know, it's going talking to Carl. It's going to talking to Warwick, wherever it is. It's going to talking to Maggie. You know, what Maggie did back in St Kilda, back in the 70s with women. You know, like it's the knowledge is here.
So there's some good questions coming online, and there was a question about what banks would actually lend to a Castlemaine CLT, and so Beyond Bank is one that lends to the ACT Land Trust, and interestingly, the Police Bank of the ACT has been the Police Superannuation and Banking Society. They're another one who do it. John mentioned the Commonwealth Bank has a shared equity product, and we're hearing of other banks that are coming through now. So that's been the advantage of government coming on board with the ground lease stories. So so can we have community housing providers with a CLT? Certainly, we are working on some of those relationships, but gee whiz, they are so busy. They need resourcing. Same with Homes Victoria. I don't know if anyone's tried to connect in with them, but it's really hard to make a connection there. Everyone's busy building, and here in Victoria, it was interesting to see that for the Albanese government's aim of 1.2 million homes, Victoria is almost on target to do its share and running at 98% of their expected supply rate. And this is with all this demonisation of the government, that investors have left the state and, you know, there's no housing being built, says the Herald Sun. Well, actually the data is saying that a mix between development and government through the big housing build is helping. So it's interesting to see, that we can get to these supply outcomes. We just got to hope that prices start to trickle down. And I've been watching the difference between Sydney and Melbourne home housing prices. Usually there's about a $200,000 difference. In the last 18 months or so, it's stretched to $400,000. So in terms of pricing growth, Victoria is winning the race, and some of it's because of that supply, but there's also been a host of other taxes that my good friends at Prosper Australia have helped implement, myself included, that are now starting to come to fruition. So
Carl, you've got a question from Maggie behind you.
Oh, Maggie, come on through.
Well, the question was about philanthropy, really, and this place where philanthropists could.
Yes.
It's a cultural shift, isn't it, to do with how money is shared.
Yes.
And it was Mackenzie's Bezos that you're talking about.
Mackenzie
who
Scott.
is considered to be the greatest philanthropist in the US.
Yes.
Actually, because she has billions of dollars to put to good use, and she's doing that.
Yes.
Encouraging big, wealthy people in our lifetime, that wealth really, there's so much more than there was. The gap between the rich and the poor is enormous now. That idea of making a state for a wealthy philanthropist's name or something like that. How do we get that money to come back to the community is my question.
Well, it's all about impact these days,
Yeah.
and with the sort of data we have in this report, it's proving to be attractive, and hopefully in the next few months we're going to be presenting to some both old money families and some new tech bros and girls who've made some good money. So it'll be interesting to see whether the old money or the new money comes through, in which side wins. So but definitely philanthropy is important, and I'm trying to use my tax reformer hat to bring some tax incentives to community-based housing. So That's what we need. We have, you know, billions of dollars in tax expenditures that the government hands out, as we mentioned earlier. Yeah, how can we channel them towards us?
About investing in housing, our superannuation funds, our industry superannuation funds, invest heavily in housing in North America and Europe, but not Australia.
But they are starting to change that, because part of the problem was the rules were that they had to aim for a commercial return. And so if you know, you ever see anyone, there's some woman up in Byron Bay who says, I can deliver affordable housing and double-digit returns. And seriously, I do not know how that's possible. They shouldn't be mentioned in the same same breath.
The drugs are better up there, Carl.
Oh, yeah.
Easier to get.
Okay, Jack Piper asks online, can we start with a 1/4 acre and one house on it? What scale makes sense to start? Yes, that's a great question, Jack. Thank you. Yeah, we've toyed with this one. You know, it depends how big the block is and whether you can get 3 or 4 homes on it. But we've kind of come to the conclusion that unless we can get a 2 hectare type size where we can get at least 20 homes on it, maybe 1 we could get away with, but aiming for 20 residents would be worth all the toil of going through the planning rigmarole and finance and so forth. So that's the sort of baseline number we've aimed at. But yeah, you could start off with 1 home. There's a woman in Daylesford who wants to do exactly that and get a granny home out the back and donate it to a CLT. So, you know, it would be great if more of that sort of activity occurred. And yeah, there's this whole generational change that's bringing about a new philanthropic look. There's another very interesting woman I met recently who's, she's concerned about all of the colonialised wealth she's made and wants to give back. So I think
Carl,
there's...
just on that question of 1 block, if we think about the suburbs, or the neighbourhoods really of Elwood and East St Kilda, so I'm now back in the 1929, 1936 time, and the advent of the company share, and the idea that there would not be a Californian or Federation bungalow on 1 block of land. There would be 8 apartments over 2, 3 or 4 stories. And so we are at a point in time, if there's 100,000 people homeless on any given day, and we're 300,000 houses behind in Victoria, that perhaps we think differently about what settlement is. And there was a decision made to go with the suburban model after World War II and not go with the European model.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
So, you know, we're at a moment in time to rethink. I keep saying at the moment AI is just the second Gutenberg, and I think we're back to the apartment. And that I was thinking through today, a name for what was I really talking about here on 1 block of land, as this person has asked the question. Well, it's a co-apart home. That is, it's my apartment that's connected to a collective that I'm really happy with, and we all call it home, and it's on a small footprint. You know, it's 4 stories on 100 square metres in a parkland of 1,000 square metres. So it's really, we're at the moment in time when we can engage with our architect and our philosopher and our artisan carpenter builder, you know, to think differently and to know what we've always thought about. I met a woman on a bus today who said, can I just ask you what you think? She said to me, can I ask you what you think about this? I live in a 5-bedroom house and my 4 children can't afford their rent anymore, but I love my house. Well, friends in Kensington 5 years ago turned their double-fronted Victorian 4-bedroom into 7 apartments by lifting the roof. And every apartment has its own entrance and exit. and it's still defined as one house under the building code and the planning scheme.
Really?
Legally,
How'd they do that?
yes. Thank you to the Vietnamese family of 4 generations in the city of Bringbank in 2014, took council to VCAT and said, we are a family and we live in one home.
2014.
Yeah.
There you go.
So what about, I'm really concerned about rentals. How can that happen with CLT?
We can do a CLT rental, but we just need deeper pockets.
Yeah.
You know, that's the advantage of a CLT is residents come together with the trust and we share the equity so that we can produce that housing supply. But yeah, when, you know, the modular housing that's now available, there's a potential that we can include some rental supply to begin with, but it really depends on our philanthropic connections. So, yeah, that is the big issue. So yeah, we understand in the UK that is what they're doing more of with CLTs is actually because they've got the networks with philanthropy and government and the financial system, they're providing I think 60% affordable rental to only 40% ownership. So
I'll just talk about the legal governance model again, because it helps in answering that question of how money gets brought in for rental in the Trinity part to the...
Go ahead.
No? Oh, okay. So
I'm getting tired. I reckon you guys... I'm thirsty. I reckon you guys must be too.
well, I mean, basically there are the people who are on ground, and there are people who are off ground of neighbourhood or village or town, and there are people that come with wisdom of governance. But it's that second group that can invest into rental.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, and you understand that from your question.
I'm desperate for more rent. We've got to get more rent.
We do.
We do.
We do.
But one of the advantages of the CLT is that the people who are on the verge of being able to afford but can't quite,
Yeah.
then they start to move out of the rental market, and so there's less pressure on the rental market through that. So it does help to some degree.
Usually people will sell and go to their new place.
Yeah.
No, I think for CLTs, I think you're looking at new. The goal is getting people out of the rental market, isn't it?
Yeah, we want to empty the rental market of those who've been locked out by this sudden price jump,
Okay.
so that rents can hopefully come down a bit and more renters can access that, and then the CLT can start its own self-funding mechanism so that we can in time provide more rental housing. So yeah, I reckon we've got one more lucky last question, John. Good, I love it. I didn't think you guys were going to ask any questions there at one point, but there you go.
So if you know, you found some people came together, you know, maybe 8 people, and you've got $300,000, and you're looking around Castlemaine, and what can you get, and how's it going to work in practice? These people come together with a bit of money, and they think, I want to do this. How do you? What you know? You've got planning to go through. You've got finance. You've got to go to these shitty banks, yeah, or not. Yeah?
Well,
so how does it's all fine. It looks great.
Yeah.
But in practice, people come together and they want to make it work. They've got steps they've got to go through.
Yep.
It's like I look at it, I go, geez, that's a big.
It's a big project, that's for sure, but that's why we're here to help. That's why we have people like John who have all this wisdom. There was a registration from the Malden Community Bank. Someone was coming from the bank tonight. Hey, well done. Good, we need to hear from you. So, lock the doors. Oh, fun. So, you know, with those things, we're developing those pathways for people, and we've also got our ear to the ground to what government's doing. So John's alluded to what was announced in April this year, this great design fast track, where you can get 8 medium density homes on, I think, a normal block.
Well, on 1,000 square metres.
On 1,000 square metres, so a bit bigger. Yep. So they're trying to prioritise and accelerate the planning, as we know. So yeah, the government is trying to work hard. Finance is helping. Philanthropy is coming together. But yeah, the problem has been the cost of construction. And so that's going to be one of the things that's going to be interesting. How can we mobilise people who know how to use a hammer and a saw and maybe good at cobbing? You know, how do we build up all of the sort of building practices within each community so we can minimise some of those costs? You know, the modular comes flat pack, we've got to put it together. How do we do this? And, you know, the one thing I haven't talked about is the connection cost to infrastructure. So that's 30 to 50 grand that gets locked on a mortgage. And we are starting to lobby government to do an affordable housing infrastructure bond so that it's spread out over 20 years of residence rather than one person having to put it on 6-7% mortgage interest rate. Why doesn't government do what they used to do and provide an infrastructure bond at 4 to 5%? So it's a lot cheaper and spread it out over time. So if we had the worst way to do things, you know, we're doing them right now. And so it's nice to think that we can have a progressive mindset, but actually outdo the right wing on efficiency. You know, we can outdo them on quality. You know, there's so many things we can outdo them on. So we just have to keep lobbying our local MPs, send them our way to Grounded, and John and I and Nat and the rest of the team are ready to, you know,
Engage.
curl their ears. Yeah.
Are we having more questions, or do I stand up?
I reckon we wrap up. We can always talk with a glass in our hand. can't we?
I encourage you to think deeply. I really thank you very much for coming out tonight. Be demanding of Grounded. And it's important that you also understand, without mentioning the person's name, that a local person has funded Grounded, funded Carl and then Nat and the organisation for the last three.
We're turning 3 on August. August
So
1.
this was a person who basically said, I want this dialogue to happen. And it's a lot of money that's been, you know, it's less than that figure 1 with an M after it, but it's trending that way. So it's really important to know that there is courage and generosity, and I invite you to be calm and be generous, and together we'll have courage. So I welcome you into the go and lean on the bar with Carl, and thank you for coming.
But yeah, if anyone wants to join Mackle, please. Thank you. Good on you. Join Mackle, Mount Alexander Community Land Limited.
Okay.
It's our land trust group.
To join it, what do you have to do?
Attend a few meetings. Yeah. Sign a and become a member. Yeah.
So I have to give you my email so I know about the
Yes.
meeting.
Yes, I'd love that.